How are you going to name your movie Longlegs and have no spider imagery in it whatsoever? Thank you for all the love on my previous video on the best A Quiet Place ripoff ever. Today, we're talking about horror movies again, specifically this one.
Oh yeah!
Longlegs, directed by Oz Perkins, whose daddy is none other than Psycho Dream Boy Anthony Perkins, and who is also known for playing David in Legally Blonde, follows FBI agent Lee Harker as she is assigned to an unsolved case in Nowhere, Oregon in the 90s due to her alleged half-psychic abilities. Somebody or something is causing fathers to kill their entire families, and a series of cryptic letters have been left behind by the killer at the scene of each crime. As Harker slowly, actually pretty quickly, uncovers the mysterious code left by the killer Longlegs at each crime scene, she discovers a connection to Satan and the occult, as well as her own personal connection to the killer. That's the very basic no spoilers summary, but I'll probably be talking about a few spoilers in this video, so consider yourself warned. While this movie is very pretty, it has its fair share of snaggles. A marketing campaign that was genius, but so overhyped the movie couldn't possibly live up to it, the unfortunate tendency for big-name actors to overshadow productions so much that it's hard to suspend disbelief, and most importantly, the unnecessary explanation of every little thing that just happened because you don't trust the audience to figure it out. So let's talk about it a little bit. And hey, don't forget to like and subscribe if you like what you see. I'm just going to go ahead and say what everyone else on this website and on every movie review is going to say about this movie. I was hyped for Longlegs. The fact that we got so little information about this movie beforehand was almost perfect. Almost. But what happens when your advertising campaign is so clever that it ends up being much, much smarter than the actual movie? Online, a large majority of people are saying that they stupidly bought into the hype of Longlegs, but I don't think that's quite being fair to us little consumers of media down here. If you felt underwhelmed by Longlegs the same way I did, it's really not your fault. The marketing absolutely made you feel that way. 6 months ago, like everybody else in the online horror pockets, this video stumbled across my YouTube algorithm. 30 unsettling seconds of an intercepted 911 call recording with a man's terrified voice and slow zoom in on this family photo with flashes of code throughout, then unnervingly elongated legs of a seemingly deceased person. Haha, get it? Longlegs. And it ended with this cryptic code. I was hooked immediately on whatever this was. When I found out it was actually part of a marketing campaign for a summer horror movie called Longlegs, you can believe I was stoked. It was giving Blair Witch Project in the marketing in the best way possible. I enjoyed that I was initially fooled too. There was no way to tell unless you went to the YouTube channel and saw that it was posted by Neon itself, that it wasn't part of another ARG or something. The flashing code reminded me immediately of Seven and Zodiac, and it was just creepy enough to be intriguing and make me want more. And that was the thing, the marketing for this movie did not stop online. There was a billboard in LA with a number you could call to hear Longlegs' creepy voice. About a month before the movie's release, the Seattle Times published a letter from Longlegs himself, which clever horror movie fans were able to extract a key from and decipher. The ad led to a website, which is filled with stories of the victims and cryptic password-protected zip files that are free for downloading, all part of the movie's lore. The whole site gives off very early internet rotten.com vibes and transport you back to the good old days. And yeah, if you're trying to find a way to cut through the barrage of advertisements we see every single day, a sense of mystery and the smallest amount of info possible with non-traditional marketing tactics and mediums is a fantastically clever way to draw people in, especially when you're advertising a horror movie. I went to see Longlegs in theaters on the first night it was released, and I was pretty excited. When I walked in there, I was prepared for the scariest horror movie of the year, the one that'll make you shit your pants in the theater and scream and cry and throw up or whatever. At least that's what the reviews were saying. And this movie was downright breathtaking in the way it was shot. Each scene and the way it was shot felt very deliberate, and you can feel the craft behind it. Familiar, everyday places become liminal in this movie, and each scene is just stitched with this feeling of dread. But for all the tension this movie manages to send through your body, it's just not really shit-your-pants scary. Not in the conventional sense the marketing made it look like. I'm not sure what these reviewers were watching, but Longlegs is way more of a psychological thriller than your traditional scary boogeyman movie. It's a gorgeous film, but if you're going into this expecting to be terrified by jump scares, though there are a few scattered here and there, and your world absolutely rocked by Nicolas Cage's appearance, you're gonna be disappointed. Movie review juggernaut Red Letter Media called it the most elevated episode of Criminal Minds ever, which makes sense because Cage basically looks like George Costanza the one time he was on there. And Criminal Minds really is what Longlegs is. It's just not the unsettling heir to Hereditary that everyone was expecting. And that's okay. One of the big stories that came out was that one about Michael Monroe's heartbeat spiking to 170 BPM when she first saw Nicolas Cage, which when you read would make you think Annie Wilkes herself would be terrified of what he looked like. In hindsight, this is hilarious when you see how non-terrifying Cage is in that particular scene, and how it's hard to just not see him doing his feral Cage thing dressed in glam rock makeup throughout the entire movie. Although the trailers did a great job of hiding Cage's face and voice, and that was the pull for a lot of people who were hyped for this movie, It's Nicolas Cage, man. He's a victim of what I like to call the Chris Pratt effect. An actor who's done so much good or bad acting and is in so much media that it becomes that much harder to separate their face from their current role, or, the art from the artist, as the kids say. I went to this movie with somebody who claimed to have no clue at all that it was him until he first appeared in full on screen, which was funny because, well, if you've ever seen a Nicolas Cage movie, you're gonna recognize him immediately no matter how much they try to obscure him. The man literally has a movie called The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent about his own self, because the meme is that he's in everything. Regardless, so much effort was made to obscure him in the lead up to the movie, but it seemed like Perkins couldn't really trust the audience quite enough, because he slaps Cage's name right up there in huge letters as Longlegs in the opening title sequence, so even those who hadn't witnessed the marketing would know it was him. I think the most frustrating thing about the Longlegs character himself is that he really could have been played by anybody. Despite the marketing build-up, Cage's Longlegs is nowhere near this, genre-bending, scary-looking villain. He just kind of looks like a mashup of all the famous serial killers from history. Though his performance is just as good as any Berserk Cage performance you can think of, and at times is actually the most entertaining part of the movie, especially when his raspy voice is juxtaposed against the slow, drawn-out shots. It simply would have been scarier if the man underneath the mask was somebody much more unknown. Or Barry Keoghan. If it were totally obscured who was even playing Longlegs until the end of the movie, the audience would never be able to know if they fully saw or understood him. But when I watch, all I see is Nicolas Cage. Micah Monroe, for her part, does a fantastic job portraying this very obvious Silence of the Lambs role. She's very brave, but filled to the brim with anxiety in each scene, and like she never wants to reveal too much to anybody. She looks like she's keeping a secret the whole movie, and that's perfect for the role she's playing. And while that's all well and good, the script she's given seems painfully lacking in anything substantial, which in turn just waters down her performance. At the beginning of the movie, Harker is able to spot an unrelated perp simply by looking at a house because she is inexplicably half-psychic. This leads her to figuring out Longlegs' long unsolved code in about 5 minutes, with little to no explanation as to how, besides a short exposition monologue about his algorithm, which dashed my hopes built up by marketing for a more turning of the screw investigative part of the movie. It seemed as though we were just kind of watching her figure it out, keeping our eye on the weird shadows in the background until she went, aha, and we went on to the next scene for more explanation. However, while she's able to figure out his code, no sweat, she's apparently unable to discover him living with her and her mother in the basement, or her mother aiding Longlegs on his Satan-worshipping murders for years and years. I guess it was those damn-ass metallic balls.
It was this damn-ass rock.
But still, it feels like that detail is being used as a crutch for some stuff here and just omitted for explaining other stuff, with no clear narrative as to why. Framing, mood, and tension are all wonderfully present in Longlegs. The entire first hour of the movie is able to keep you in this constant state of dread over what's going to happen next, and that's worth the watch in and of itself. Unfortunately, the third act falls into this classic horror trap of feeling the need to explain everything that just happened and everything you just saw, and despite the implications of its seemingly complicated, lore-filled, code-worded story, is apparently satisfied with a devil-made-me-do-it ending that just feels flat, and winds up completely watering down the terrifying visual it set out to create. In an interview with The Hollywood Reporter, Oz Perkins said he doesn't really watch contemporary horror. He also said in another interview that he doesn't do a lot of research for his movies beyond what is needed for the movie itself. Both of these statements are fully on display in Longlegs. If you are left wondering why Harker seemed like a pretty bad FBI agent at times, like not checking her surroundings or calling for backup when she should have, this is probably why. If you were left wondering why the movie seemed like a bunch of horror tropes such as Satan worshipping, the dread of rural America, true crime serial killers, and the paranormal just stitched together without much more substance beyond that, this is probably why. There's a reason that the 1999 found footage hit horror movie Blair Witch Project worked, whereas Longlegs does not quite work. Longlegs' marketing campaign was very similar to Blair Witch Project's, and that was on purpose. They would both rely on a lot of word-of-mouth advertising, and they both focus more on tone, much more so than plot. Blair Witch Project was a very simple premise. Young adults go into the woods looking for their local urban legend. People were disappointed when it came out because it was, quote, boring and the ending was unsatisfying, but 25 years later, it's renowned as one of the most clever horror movies of all time because of its unsatisfying ending. There's no drawn-out exposition dump of information as the camera looms over the dark woods. No appearance from the Blair Witch laughing maniacally as she swoops down and eats the kids. No montage of the missing kids' families or anything like that. It just ends, and you have to live with that. A simple premise, but so much left open to interpretation. Longlegs, on the other hand, was set up to seem like it has a simple premise, but ultimately feels like it wants to touch on every little horror trope ever without really making a statement on any of it. Lee is a psychic FBI agent, but not much is done with this detail beyond the first 5 minutes. Longlegs is working for the devil, and doing so by creating possessed dolls with little balls in their heads that make dads go crazy, I guess, but it's not really clear why he's doing so other than the devil made him do it, which is so boring. There's coded biblical statements and old rock songs, but no real connection between them, and really, ultimately, no reason to care. And despite being touted as a fever dream that doesn't really need too much explanation, Perkins still felt the need for an exposition dump at the end in Lee's mother's voiceover just to make sure you got everything right. And then if that wasn't enough, they just showed it all on screen anyway, just to really drive it home. If Blair Witch Project's last 10 minutes were spent explaining the full lore behind the witch and speculating on why the kids were missing and a spooky hint as to where they maybe could be, it wouldn't have been nearly as impactful, and it wouldn't still live rent-free in people's heads even today. Blair Witch Project worked because it trusted the audience to figure out the rest of the story, and that's what keeps it in people's minds. There are a lot of, little clever things in this movie I could talk about forever. The fact that a camera flashes during Lee's psychic tests and the only girl he left alive is named Camera. The flashing images of snakes being a reference to the Hydra mentioned throughout. The Baphomet-looking figure in the background in so many shots. The clever framing of the entire TV Happy Birthday scene, which seems to foreshadow the next scene's events. But that all feels frustrating because they don't really amount to anything other than look at this thing that references this other thing that you saw. Beyond connections between certain shots, there's just no substance. The ambiguity around this movie led me to believe it would be a much more interesting story than Devil Made You Do It, and the apparent explanation that it was just all magic and supernatural forces just feels pretty lazy, as it so often does in modern horror. I get it, it's hard to make a movie about the devil these days. It's been, pardon the pun, done to death. But maybe with that in mind, it would have been interesting to see a movie about people who believe they're under the influence of the devil, when in reality they're not. If the paranormal aspects in this movie solely existed in the heads of Longlegs and Lee's mother, possibly Lee herself, I feel like there's a lot more there to write for a violent fever dream movie. A movie with nothing but unreliable narrators so the audience never knows what's really going on. All in all, Longlegs is a very beautiful fever dream of a movie, if that fever dream has an audio of somebody explaining it to you running in the background. The sound design and cinematography are nothing short of beautiful. The actors are doing the very best they can with a script that doesn't always jab you, and the dread I felt while watching the first part was something I hadn't felt in a very, very long time watching a horror movie. The problem is, when you have a unique, or uniquely subversive depending on who you ask, horror movie idea like this one, you need to be able to trust your audience with it. Longlegs makes you uneasy and encourages you to look for connections between some very pretty shots, but then just holds your hand the rest of the way through. Thanks for watching. I know this was a little bit all over the place, but I just wanted to get this review out. What are your thoughts on Longlegs? I know you've got them. Feel free to leave them below in the comments. I'm Abby, this is 1 Minute Off, and I'm gonna go watch Vampire's Kiss. Bye.